4G? 5G? Oh me, what is going on with this technology? This is the third installment of the Global Bob Show, and we hope to answer these questions. I'd like to give a big shout out to everybody that has subscribed to the show. I see the stats starting to come in and subscriber base ever so slightly ticking up, which is a good thing. Now, the reason why I started the podcast is because I get a lot of calls from friends and family that ask me different questions about technology. And so I figured that if they're calling to ask me these questions, maybe they have friends that would also like to have answers to these questions. So there you go. That's how we came up with the Global Bob Show. We are the crossroad of technology and politics. The Global Bob Show can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, and of course the site, globalbobshow.com. If you'd like to get your Global Bob merch, it can be purchased at shop.globalbob.org. So what is 5G? Well, the G on the end stands for generation. I know that seems quite obvious to some people, but you will not believe how many times I've talked to folks that said, oh, I already have 5G at my house. I said, what do you mean by 5G at your house? Yeah, my phone. It says 5G whenever I connect to my Wi-Fi. And so this seems to be one of the questions I get quite a bit. Is it the same as 5G Wi-Fi? The answer to that is simply no. It's just a coincidence that after 4G, we went to 5G, and your home Wi-Fi router has what they call the 2.4 gigahertz network and the 5 gigahertz network. And so that 5G, a lot of times it'll be your home Wi-Fi name, dash 5G. That is called gigahertz. What we're talking about is generation in this case. So starting way back, generation 1, and this is the first generation, obviously, because it's called the first generation of cell phone. And this was actually developed out in Japan, I believe in around 1979, which is easy for me to remember because that was when I was born, 1979. And this was a technology that was very close to like radio, the old business band radio, analog radio, CB radio perhaps. And so this was an analog technology. When it was rolled out, they could cover large swaths of area. One of the stories that I heard, which I have not confirmed it, but knowing what I know about RF technology, they said down in Miami, Florida, when cellular network was rolled out down there, they covered all of Miami with 3 cellular towers. They were able to cover all of Miami with the 3 towers for a couple reasons. One, they were using frequencies down around 750 to 800 megahertz. And so with the lower frequency, you can penetrate walls more easily and you can cover a lot more area. However, the actual bandwidth is a lot lower. But at the time of 1G, they weren't even thinking about delivering services like we do today, not even text messaging. So with those towers, essentially what would happen with a 1G connection, your phone would register to a tower as it moves from tower to tower or cell site to cell site, and that tower would assign your phone its own dedicated frequency. So think of it as kind of like an IP address. For computers, this was your own frequency. So when a call would come in, that frequency would become active and it would connect the 2 radios together, the radio on the phone and the radio on the cell side of it, and you could have a conversation. This worked out really well. Call quality was really good. No data services yet, so that means no texting or anything. But the main problem was that they were running out of frequencies. I remember whenever I was a young kid, and I would have the summers off, I would ride around with my dad in his truck from job site to job site. We lived in Central Florida, and so when we would go down to South Florida, he would have to dial this code. The reason why they did this is that they didn't want to assign a frequency as people roamed around if they weren't going to be in that area for a while. Sometimes I remember we would stop before leaving outside the county for him to keep dialing the code, because he would get a message back saying that the system essentially was busy. And really what that code was saying is, hey, we're out of frequencies. So you can see that this was very cumbersome because you had to have your own frequency per communications. Now going forward past the 1G system is when probably a lot of y'all started to get your first phones. Like I said, with his and his truck, it was very expensive. I remember he's told me stories before where it was nothing for his cell phone bill to run $1,500 to $2,000 a month. Now, that $2,000 a month would equate to $4,576.06 in today's dollars. I mean, could you imagine today getting a cell phone bill that's like $4,000? But at that time, he was able to justify it because it allowed him to transact business for the first time where he didn't have to stay at his desk. He could be visiting job sites. So to him, it was well worth it. So what did we get with 2G? 2G was one of the first steps into the digital cell phones as we know it. Remember, in 1G, each person was assigned a frequency while that call was happening, and so they were running out of frequencies. With 2G, we did get the digital part with the texting, and the speeds were reaching 9.6 kilobits per second. So if you think about that in megabits, I mean, that is just a fraction. And so that was basically with texting, we could text back and forth, but moreover, the phones were more efficient at handling frequencies. These phones did not look like the phones of today. This is the style phone that was the Motorola StarTAC, which was a very popular one. You know, the flip phones, the candy bar phones. You could play the snake game on them. So there wasn't the real robust color screens, definitely no touch screens. And so these are kind of the generation of phones for the 2G that most of us entered into the cell phone market with. Remember the story of my dad, very, very expensive. During the 2G phone is when you could go down to Circuit City. I think I'm dating myself now. Go down to Radio Shack and you would just, get a phone. They were still pretty expensive. The minutes were expensive, but they started doing some promotions where you could get free nights and weekends. And the one promotion I liked the best was it was free incoming calls. Man, I loved it. Me and my friends, we would set it up to where, hey, I'm going to call you, hang up, then you call me back from a landline if you're around one. That way I don't have to pay for the call. Also remember too, I would call sometimes and someone would say, hey, can I put you on hold? And you would always tell them, okay, yeah, make it quick. I'm on my cell phone. So that's the 2G phone. Now we're getting ready for the 3G, 4G, 5G. Wow, what a revolution that was. So about the time that 3G came out, there was a little product that was getting ready to hit the market, one that would revolutionize the phone industry forever. Did you guys figure out what I'm fixing to talk about? That's right. It's the iPhone. This Apple iPhone, when it hit big time. 3G being faster than 2G would top out at 42 megabits per second, was about the maximum transmit speed across the frequency. Of course, we never achieved 42 megabits per second on our 3G Apple phones, but it allowed us to do things like download songs or browse the web. And so with the 3G coming out with the faster speeds combined with the iPhone, everybody had to have one. I remembered I was up in Maryland and waited in long lines. Matter of fact, AT&T was the one that had the exclusive launch of that phone, I guess it was. And I can't tell you how many people started switching to AT&T. It was amazing. But with 3G, we also got more efficiencies where each cell tower could handle more and more calls. So remember that back in Miami, 3 cell towers covered the whole place in 1G? Well, these 3Gs, they started using the higher frequencies to get the density up, and so the towers had to be closer to the person. Now, they would still call on analog if the network, the higher frequencies weren't available. And we all remember this, right? Remember when your phone would be in some other kind of mode, like you really didn't know what it was, but the icon would change? All you know is that your battery would be drained quickly. Well, that's because it was using the analog system until the 3G system was built out. But still, now everybody had a crave for give me all this technology in my pocket. Now, with the 4G, when it came out, I don't really think it made as big of a splash to the average person because we already had a phone with a web browser. Remember, when we went from 1G to 2G, we got texting. From 2G to 3G, we got web browsing and the ability to download. 4G was just a faster experience, right? So a lot of people really didn't maybe care too much because it wasn't like, oh, I got to get 4G so I can do this or that. However, 4G was the first generation of what I like to say video messaging, video-ish type transactions. So you could snap a picture, right, and send it to somebody. And on your 3G phones, it was kind of clunky. Not a lot of people were doing it. So especially with the iPhone in your pocket, it was really cool to be able to FaceTime, but it's kind of like a play pretty, right? It's great. It's something for the kids. Now, today we know we all video conference off of our 4G enabled phones. Of course, a lot of us now have the 5G phone, but my iPad is still 4G. And it's nothing for me to get it out if I'm going down the road, not driving. My wife's driving. I'm on the iPad, video conference with Zoom and Teams and all of them. So for businessmen, it really opened up the doors for collaboration. This is because with a 4G technology, it tops out at a theoretical limit of 300 megabits per second. Now, here we go, starting to get into some of these marketing terms that we're going to see is very, very, very heavy with the 5G. You'll never see those 300 megabits per second on your smart device that's 4G enabled. However, it is quick enough to do two-way video, and so it really allowed us to send large files back and forth and not have to, read a preview of it on your phone and then go get on a computer. Also, the phone started becoming more advanced where you can actually edit Word documents and Excel documents and everything on your phone, send them back and forth. The cameras started to become really, really robust into the multi megapixels. So it made sense for people to snap pictures to say, this is what I'm looking for. Can you find this particular part in a warehouse? But however, the 4G really opened the door because these Goliaths started to come on like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all the other services around social media. And so with your phone, you could snap these high quality pictures and send them to friends and family when you were off on a trip. Now, here we go. It is time for the main event. The heavyweight is entering the arena, 5G. So before we start down the path of explaining the differences between 4G and 5G, you may want to acquire yourself a caffeinated beverage or an alcoholic beverage if it's that time in your particular time zone, because there's a lot here. These marketing folks have had a field day with 5G. As you know, you watch any broadcast on television, and about every third commercial seems to be this company that has this 5G network, and they show these bits and bytes flowing around, and very quickly you understand, I got to have 5G because of speed. But then they cut to this map. After they show you all this speed stuff, they cut to this map, and it's a nationwide map. And you look at your particular area of the state and say, hey, look, I'm covered by 5G. Man, there's a lot around this. So I think 5G has been the generation of marketing. But it's not just the carriers that have some marketing tactics that are questionable. Even the U.S. government, they established a fund in 2020 called the 5G Fund for Rural America, of which they allocated $9 billion to this fund. Now, why would they call it that? I can only speculate is that it would be easier to ask for money to connect folks in rural America. If you live in rural America like I do, you'll know that you really only have two options if fiber optics or other wireline services are not available. That is cellular modem, the 4G modem, or you can have satellite services. Everybody agrees that everyone should have internet. However, maybe 5G wireless internet isn't exactly the best option for rural America, of which we'll discuss. So a lot of the carriers are trying to fake it until they make it. They've all come under the scrutiny of the National Advertising Division for various things, either from their commercials that are not exactly, as we say, maybe true, or them going as far as changing the icon on your phone to use marketing terms. So they would take the phone that's 4G and call it 5GE, which stood for extended, but really it was just 4G technology with something called carrier aggregation. That means before you would go to a speed test site on your phone, and when your phone would request the data, it would come over one channel. So when the 5GE or carrier aggregation was utilized, you would go to that same speed test site and it would use two channels, making your phone appear twice as fast. So it made sense. Hey, I'm on 5G. It's a lot faster than 4G. However, you were simply on 4G using two channels. Now, there's other tactics too that we've seen. They'll tell you how they have nationwide coverage for 5G. Well, in fact, they only have 5G, true 5G, in select markets. So when you're seeing those coverage maps, if you stop and read the fine print, there's one in particular that may have the dominant color of pink in its logo. When that commercial comes on, wait until you see the coverage map. And it says its coverage map is generated on 700 and I think it's like 47. Anyways, in the 700 megahertz range. Back to my Miami analogy. Well, at that range, of course you can cover the whole area with only a few towers, but the lower the frequency, the slower the speed. And in 5G, I like to say it's all about the higher frequencies. Remember, as we went through the generations of technology, each one had something that was pretty significant. And this, it's the higher frequencies. And with higher frequencies do come faster speeds. But there's a trade-off to this. 5G has 3 bands to it. The lowest band is called low. The medium band is called medium. And if anybody can tell me what the high band is, you'll win a free Global Bob t-shirt. Just kidding. It's obvious. The high band is called high band. Now, the low band is in the 700, 800 megahertz range. Let's harken back to the 3G. That kind of sounds like where 3G was. The mid band is around 1.9, 1.5 gigahertz. Well, that's about where 4G is. So 5G uses bands that are much, much higher. We're talking as high as 24 to 96 gigahertz. Okay, so I know that sounds like a lot of mumbo jumbo, but here at the highest level, if you have a phone, and I'm going to just really oversimplify everything here, but if I have say a 4G phone, and that 4G phone maximum frequency it can use is 2 gigahertz, and it can download at 100 megabits per second. Jump into 5G phones. Let's say the megahertz is twice as much. Like I said, this is all just for illustration. If it's twice as much, so let's say it's around the 4 gigahertz spectrum, well, it can download at 200 megabits per second. So every time the frequency doubles, in essence, so does the speed. But here lies the problem. once you get into the higher frequencies, you have two options to get the data back and forth between the tower. Either you have to increase the power on the handset and the tower, but the reason why it's important on the handset, you have to increase the power on the handset to go the same distance. So if it takes 1 watt of power on 4G to go 4 miles, then it would take 2 watts of power on 5G to go the same distance. And this is why I'm I get a little upset when the government says, oh, this is the 5G and it's going to connect all of rural America. And it's just not exactly being truthful, because with 5G, in essence, you got to have twice as many towers. Remember the Miami analogy? I keep pointing back to that, right? Because that was low frequency, low bandwidth, couple towers. 4G, higher frequency, higher bandwidth, more towers. And now 5G, to actually achieve these speeds that they advertise, you're going to be able to download at 1 gigabit per second to your phone. Oh my gosh, you're going to have to be within a few hundred feet of that 5G tower. Now, if you're at a stadium where you have the clear line of sight between the cell tower, and at this point, we're not even talking cell tower. These speeds that they advertise, they're basically almost like access points. And I'll give you a great example. Back in December, I was delayed at the Salt Lake City, Utah airport. So what do? I go and find me a place to get me a burger and a beer. I pull out my iPhone, and lo and behold, I had 5G ultra wide band. Matter of fact, I've never seen the logo before. It said 5G UW. I've seen the other ones, right? The fake logos. But this one was different. Being the nerd that I am, I did a bandwidth test, and I pulled about 700 megabits per second to my phone. That was amazing. I mean, if you would have told me 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago that you'd be able to pull that much speed, you just couldn't fathom it. But then I got to looking around, and I would take my phone and shield it with my beer. And I was doing that because I know millimeter waves, these true 5G technology, these higher frequency waves, they're blocked by everything. Water is one of the places that where RF frequencies go to die. So I took my beer and I was basically blocking the signal so I could make my phone directional. And I was able to rudimentally pinpoint where this 5G access point was. And it was about 50 feet away from me. So what that tells me is that high speed is probably only available for that particular area. And to further prove this out, I went to the bathroom, and whenever I turned the corner, my phone instantly left the ultra wideband and just lit up 4G. I did a speed test on it, and on the 4G, I was pulling about 40 megabits per second. And so what the folks are trying to do is convince everybody, because they show you all this high speed stuff in their commercials, but then they show you a coverage map, and the two just don't equate. Back to the 5G fund for rural America. Now, the government would have you believe that because you have 5G on your phone and you're at the Salt Lake City airport, so you've experienced in your mind 5G, so who wouldn't want gigabit speeds? But these millimeter waves, I can tell you in my own experimentation at my ISP, where we turn up these millimeter wave technology, and we've turned these up for almost 2 years now. And the antenna we have to use on the client side is much bigger than an iPhone. And on the tower side, it's probably about the size of a blender with the top on it and stuff, so it's kind of like a little cylinder cone on there. And that technology, using very high power that's plugged into an electrical outlet, it's only good for about 800 feet. And so when you try to convince us that if we are in agreement and to give money to the 5G fund, that this is going to be available everywhere. There's a reason why it has 3 bands to it. So technically, your 5G is all encompassing of all the bands, from the first generation bands all the way to the new 5G bands. And then beyond with the newer ones, like I said, with a millimeter wave, all this is encompassing to come up with this brilliant thing called 5G. And I'm telling you all, I'm sure that it will get there at some point, but how do you take where I live at, and there's trees all around me, there's a lot of protected areas around me. How are they going to put up almost 3 times as many cell towers just to get that 5G, true 5G, the 1 gigabit per second 5G all the way to my house? I don't think that's going to be happening anytime soon. I think we'll see some advances in technology where, just like with 4G, where they did the carrier aggregation, I can see that, but you cannot overcome the laws of physics. Anybody that works around me, I say it all the time. The speed of light is the speed of light. RF characteristics are RF characteristics. And one of the main RF characteristics with any kind of RF technology is that the higher the frequency, the higher the wattage, the higher the power that you have to go to achieve the same distance. Millimeter waves also do not penetrate walls. There's nothing we can do to overcome this. And so just make sure when you're seeing these commercials and when your congressmen are asking for funding and they're using these marketing terms like 5G, Connect America, rural, how they're going to do it all together, just ask yourself, how are they going to get this technology to do something that physically is not possible? Sure, your phone may say 5G on it, but you're not going to be having 5G at these high speeds. Your phone will say 5G, and chances are it'll be on a frequency around 750, 800 megahertz, because that's the frequencies that can penetrate walls. And at 800-foot radius that I've demonstrated, I mean, you're talking about, this is a technology not for rural America. This is a technology for urban America, where they can put access points on the side of a street lamp or an access point inside of a parking garage. So don't believe the hype around it and all the marketing around it. Also, just know that don't run out and buy a 5G phone because you think that you got to have that faster speed. I can tell you right now, what do we care if we download a movie and it takes a minute or so onto our phone as opposed to a few seconds? To me, it's very expensive. Right now, some of the new phones that are coming out, and the juice just is not worth the squeeze. So with that, I hope everybody made it to the end of the podcast. This is one of my most technical ones so far, and I'm sorry if I lost you. You can reach out to me, globalbobshow@gmail.com, Twitter @globalbobshow. You can also call my cell phone or text me if you do have that number, and I'll try to answer all your questions. Once again, thank you so much for tuning into the podcast. If you have anything that you'd like for me to discuss, to add some clarity around, please email, call, or text me your questions, and I will make a podcast out of it, because chances are, if you have the same question, I'm sure a lot of people do, and I want to explain things in such a way that my mom can understand it. And so with that, thank you so much. I'll see you next week.